Hey everybody. Okay, so I'm using a new microphone today. So if you cannot hear me and you are joining live, please let a bitch know. So today we're going to talk about a pretty deep topic, but it's one I really like to talk about. And that is grief and sex. How do we move through and process big emotions while still being open to pleasure? And this isn't just sexual pleasure, but just pleasure in general. And so before I go into the 3-step framework that I really use to handle this, I want to share with you a little bit about my story with grief. So when I was 10, my mother got diagnosed with cancer. And my entire life was always in and out of hospitals. And the last few years of her life was just in and out of emergency rooms. And so it was an interesting experience. Like my experience with grief wasn't just when she died, I grieved. It was also this anticipation of grief at all times. And that was a part of my normal, that was what was normal for me was what are we going to get for groceries and how long is my mom going to be alive? And so it's interesting because growing up, that gave me really, really tough skin in a lot of ways. And I created a coping mechanism where if I was hurt or sad or upset, I would really not let that show. And then my mother died. She died when I was 23. I'm 35 now. And when she died, it was an interesting experience too, because on the one hand, I was anticipating this loss my whole life, it felt like. And so when she died, I almost was prepared for it, even though you can never prepare for something like that. It didn't come as a shock, I guess. And it was so interesting because I was actually completing my final year at UC Berkeley, the year that she died. So she never got to see me graduate. She did some beautiful things about my mom. When I came out as gay, my mom started volunteering at the LGBTQ Center in Los Angeles a week later to just support me. And she was doing this while on chemo, okay? Like, and if anyone knows cancer and chemotherapy, you know how intense and how exhausting it is to be on chemo. So the fact that chemo and all, she's volunteering to support her daughter was so beautiful. And then when I got into UC Berkeley, so fun fact, when I got to UC Berkeley, I didn't actually go to study sex and sexology. Momo, come here. Come here, baby. My dog is wandering around my office. Come here. Do you want to be on the live? Do you want to say hi to people? My little sweet. Do you want up? Come up. Nope, you're going to bed. Okay. She's a senior doggy now, so I just let her do whatever she wants to do. But where was I? This is going to be a much slower paced video than usual, by the way, everybody, as I relive my own grief and talk to you about grief. I'm usually, I feel like a very zesty, boom, boom, boom kind of person, and I love that about myself. But another thing about my mom that I wanted to share that is really beautiful. So when I went to UC Berkeley, fun fact, I went to study English literature. It was my dream as a kid to write books, fantasy books about dragons and fairies and, princesses and warriors and all that type of stuff. And so I actually went to UC Berkeley not to study sex, but to study English literature. And I won't go into that story, but some stuff happened. And I was completely redirected into the gender women studies and LGBTQ studies department. I found sexology, and it was a huge awakening moment of like, oh my God, my soul purpose. It almost felt like my soul purpose found me. And so I remember calling home while I'm in school. It's my first semester at Berkeley, and my mom answers. And I'm like, Mom, I think I want to change my major. I think I want to change everything. And at this time, this was a pretty big deal because my whole family, my mom, my dad, my sister, all my friends, everyone knew my dream was to write books, to write stories. I am still such a nerd. All my tattoos are covered right now, but every tattoo that I have is all nerd. Everything is from a book. Okay. Big nerd life over here. And actually, I do still write all my stories. I haven't published them yet, but I actually have a lot of fiction stories because that's one of the ways that I support myself creatively, and I never stopped writing. But when I did go to UC Berkeley, I found this new department and I realized like this was what I was meant to do. And it was a complete soul awakening, soul recognizing moment. It was beautiful. And I call my mom and what is it, Momo? You guys can't see her or hear her, but she's just wandering around the office like, come here, baby girl. Um, anyway, when I called my mom, I was like, I don't know what she's going to say because I literally have had this dream ever since I was young of being a fiction writer. And now, and I got into this amazing school, and now I'm going to drop everything, change everything, and study sex of all things. And my mom couldn't have been more supportive. I remember I told her, and there was this pause on the phone, and then she was just like, this makes so much sense. Like, this is great. And was just so supportive. And that's how she's always been. Always been so supportive. So, but then I was always growing up knowing like our time is limited. No. You wanna go outside? Come on, baby. All right, we are back. No more distractions. But that's what makes these live videos fun, right? Like they're a little uncurated, unedited, unfiltered. This is real life. Where was I? Yeah, growing up my whole life knowing that we had an expiration date with this person. And so what's interesting is with my own grief and experiencing that so young, like at 10 years old, learning like what is cancer and what is a terminal illness and all of these things. One coping mechanism I really developed was not being 100% vulnerable or letting myself be 100% vulnerable because that experience created a story in my head of why try at love? You've lost before you've already began. And of course, I mean, I'm 10 years old. I don't know that that's like the trauma that's being birthed into my brain and into my heart. But anyway, fast forward to 23 years old. I have one more year left at UC Berkeley. I was falling in love for the first time with someone who I would later discover was had a narcissistic personality disorder, a pretty severe one. And so that in a 6-month period at the age of 23, I'm about to graduate from school, but my mom dies. So my mom, who was my greatest champion, did not get to see me graduate, which is, I know she was there, like spiritually, energetically, but it was such a big moment. And she was always such a supporter. So it was really painful that she missed that. And then after my graduation, like a month after, I find out that the person I was dating and falling in love with had 3 other girlfriends. Okay. Lord. Anyway, and the way I found that out, and honestly, if anybody from that time, like any of these 3 people or this person ever watches this video, nothing but love to all of you. Like we all grow, we learn, like I have nothing but love for everyone in this story. But at that time, I was living in Berkeley, in Oakland. I went over to San Francisco to Q Bar on Castro Street for a ladies' night. And there is the person I'm dating we'd been dating for like 4 or 5 months. And I kept waiting for her to ask me to be her girlfriend. Cause I'm like, when is that going to happen? Like we're dating, we're intimate this should be happening, and it never was. And well, that was because homegirl had 3 other hoes. But anyway, I showed up to Q Bar. There was my girl. She literally lifted me up, twirled me around, kissed me, and then walked out onto the patio where her other girlfriend was waiting. And then I walked down to the patio, and then, as fate would have it, the other girlfriend walked into Q Bar. And before I know it, there's 3 of us arguing amongst each other of who is dating this person. The person in question that we were all dating ran from the bar, just left, which, like, at that point, what are you going to do if, like, all of your hoes in different area codes are at the same bar? Anyway. And then I found out that there was not just us 3, but a 4th person. And so that was like my first big, like unbelievable, like, just grief sandwich of hell. Mom is dead. The first person I've ever really been in love with is not good at that time. I'm sure they're a very different person now. Again, this was like over 10 years ago. I'm sure they're lovely now and have gone to therapy and have done healing, or at least I hope that for them. But at that time, it was horrible. And then, and so I'm graduating from Berkeley, dead mom, no love, or it feels like there's like no love in my life. And then I come home. And that was really where my journey began with grief and pleasure, right? So at this point, I'm a sexologist. I've graduated top of my class from UC Berkeley. And a moment that I would think would be so beautiful and fun turns into, I did this great accomplishment, but I'm just returning home where everyone is grieving. And so that was where I began my journey with, I've always had this as a part of my personality, where I refuse to not let optimism and pleasure be a part of my life, even in the hardest of times. So that was where that began. And then fast forward to now. So obviously now I'm 35 now. Back then I was 23. This is like 13 years later. Last year was one of the hardest years, surprisingly, that I've ever had since my mom died. Actually, that's not true. COVID was definitely also a really, really hard time. But one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this talk today about grief and sex, how do we deal with it? How do we move through this stuff? Is I started this journey with grief when my mom died in a way I obviously had never had to grieve before. And then last year, something happened in my business, lost a huge amount of funding, huge, and was literally scrambling just to keep pleasure science afloat, live my life in a way that, like, feels okay and decent, I had staff. And so I'm also thinking, like, with losing money with pleasure science, how am I going to pay the people, like my employees? So that happened last year. On top of that happening last year, one of my childhood friends died completely out of the blue, just from a car accident. And she was one of the funniest people I've ever known. And is also just young. I remember, like, when I came home and I told my dad this person had died, and he just looked at me, and I could feel that he felt so sorry for me, because, as you do get older, it's not your parents who die, it's your friends, your colleagues, the people around you. So I going into 2024, I was like, well, this is turning out, this is a difficult one. We have a friend dead. We have business struggles, which is its own form of grief. Because for me, what I do with pleasure science, like, I love this. I'm doing this because serving all of you and sharing this information is literally what makes my soul feel alive. It is when I am happiest. And so to see my baby, 13 years of work, be in such peril was its own form of grief. And then my friend dies. And then also very suddenly, two of my closest friends, two of my best friends, these are both friendships that were like over 10 years. One was actually almost 10 years of friendship. The other one was over 10 years of friendship. Both of these friends, and these were two different people, completely different people, but those friendships ended. And it was the type of situation where, like, I'm not one to say, like, to blame, say who's wrong, who's this, who's that. But it was kind of insane that, like, last year was 2024 and I had four significant losses. Um, and one thing that really came through and that I actually remembered was, like, when my mom died, how did I navigate that? What did I do? And it started getting me extremely present with all of the ways that I have been able to honor grief and still enjoy pleasure. For example, so last year was a very difficult year emotionally and professionally. I will say, on the professional front, pleasure science is back and better than ever. This is actually already, we're only 3 months into this new year. This has been one of the best years we've ever had as a business so far. So, those type of slumps, you don't stay down for long. You always come back up. But I will say, last year with all these different things going on, you would think it was a year where that's the whole story. But actually, along with all of those hardships were some incredible moments. I met three different lovers, not all at the same time, but I met a lover in Paris. I met a lover in Los Angeles. And then I met another lover while I was traveling somewhere else. But last year, despite all of that hardship and death and pain, endings, loss, and, scrambling in business, trying to figure out what to do, I met incredible lovers. I had some of the best sex of my life. I learned shibari and explored Japanese rope bondage for the first time. I mean, I had a lot of pleasure. I had a lot of orgasmic connection. And so that's what I want to talk to you about today. This idea that when you're healing, you can't enjoy pleasure. And so before I dive into the three-step modality that I use for myself and that I teach my clients who are coming to me and are like, I'm grieving, but I still want to enjoy pleasure. Before I dive into those three steps, I want to talk a little bit about what can happen in your brain and body when you're grieving. So there's there's a total spectrum of how grief can make us feel, think, act, behave. But with sex specifically, there are two sides of the spectrum, and we kind of can fall anywhere in between. And the two sides are aversion to pleasure. This is where food doesn't taste good, touch doesn't feel good, the sun is shining, you can't feel it. Aversion to pleasure. It's also called anhedonia. I mispronounced it. Whatever. You get what I'm trying to say. There's medical terms for this aversion to pleasure. So when we're grieving, that's one thing that can happen, is a total aversion to pleasure. And this also means like a lack of inspiration to have pleasure. So not only is it like the sun is shining and I can't enjoy it, it's like the sun is shining, why even get out of bed and enjoy it, right? Like, where's my inspiration to create pleasure? And so that's one end, the aversion of pleasure. The other end is hypersexuality. Grief, loss can actually make us feel the opposite. Instead of not wanting to have any sex or pleasure, we're using pleasure to self-soothe. So this can look like having a lot of sex, having a lot of hookups, going out a lot, maybe indulging in substances, alcohol, all types of things like that. So there's on the one end, the aversion of pleasure, on the other end, the hyper pleasure or hypersexual behavior. And so the reason why I start here is I just want you to know both are normal. There is no right or wrong way to heal. There is no right or wrong way to grieve. There is no right or wrong way to do any of this stuff. And if you are on the hypersexual end, I also want to say here are some other things that specifically happen when we're grieving and when we are activated to be hypersexual. Because we're in this place of grief, hypersexuality can also look like not taking care of yourself in a similar way to the aversion of pleasure can. So in aversion of pleasure, in a version, not one version, but a version of pleasure. When you are experiencing that side of the spectrum, what's really common is to not take care of yourself in the sense of I'm not going to like wake up to go outside, or I'm not going to masturbate, or I'm not going to make an effort. But with hypersexuality, the way that we don't take care of ourselves is I'm not going to get tested for STDs. I'm not going to use a condom or other safer sex barriers, right? It's you being hypersexual, but not necessarily taking care of your safety or your health while you're doing that. And again, like, I'm not sharing this because I want anyone to feel shame, but just to have these understandings. These are trauma responses, right? And so if you are someone who is on the hypersexual spectrum with handling grief and loss, totally fine. Pop off, queen. But just remember to take care of your sexual health and keep a note in your head. If you're not taking care of that, that's probably a grief response, right? And so just something to be aware of. Awareness is really powerful medicine. So a little bit of information on how that works. If you want more information too, by the way, on healing trauma and self-sabotage and how your brain and your mind and your body will respond and react after trauma, grief, and loss, go to pleasurescience.com and look up healing trauma and self-sabotage. I go really deep into all of that stuff. But for today, what I'm going to share with you is a very simple 3-step modality that helps you process big emotions, honor yourself, and be open to pleasure. And now I also want to say a quick caveat is if you're not feeling open to pleasure, that's also okay. You don't need to force it. Do not force it. Do not force yourself to do anything. Okay. So here is the 3 steps. So the first step is name it to tame it. And by the way, I put my glasses on. I have a little note. I have my notes up now, so I'm going to be reading a little bit from the notes. But these are the 3 steps. The first step is what is called name it to tame it. This is a psychological modality. I didn't create name it to tame it. The framework, this 3-step framework is what I use, but name it to tame it, another psychologist came up with it, and it's brilliant. So basically what name it to tame it refers to is when you have big emotions, anxiety, fear, worry, grief, depression. Well, depression is different because that's more of a state, loss, sadness, things like that. We have a tendency to not name those feelings, to try to bury them down or ignore them or repress them because these big feelings, they don't feel good, right? And name it to tame it is encouraging you to do the opposite. It is reminding you that when you name a feeling, it loses its power over you. So for example, when you feel fear and you don't acknowledge it, your fear will control you. It will shape how you think, and it will inform the way you walk through the world. And in that situation, your fear is in control. Now, in the same situation, if you feel fear and then you pause and you name it, oh, I'm feeling really afraid right now. All of a sudden, the feeling doesn't have control anymore. You step back into the driver's seat. So step 1 of this modality, when you're grieving and things feel really hard and you notice an avalanche of emotion coming over you, name it. I feel numb. I feel uninspired. I feel angry. I feel sad. I feel hopeless. I feel lost. I feel powerless. I feel grief. Name what you are feeling. That is step 1. It's very important. It's instantly going to shift the situation to where you can honor your emotions, but your emotions aren't going to control you. Next, step 2 is releasing sex expectations. So not just expectations, but sex expectations. So if you are frustrated because you aren't able to enjoy pleasure the way you used to before your grief, then what we need to do before bringing pleasure back into your life is take you to a place of absolute neutrality. You are neutral about your relationship to pleasure. And this means releasing all expectations. So if you are in feeling aversion to pleasure, then releasing the expectation to enjoy yourself, releasing the expectation of everything. And this might sound like, why would I do that? Then that sounds more depressing. No, the purpose is to get to that place of neutrality. It's, again, we've named it to tame it. Let's say in this situation, I feel grief, powerless, hopelessness. And then 2, now I'm going to release expectations for me to have an orgasm or, be able to initiate intimacy or enjoy intimacy. I am now that I've named the feeling, I'm going to release all the expectations I have of myself. And this part can take a couple rounds because it can sometimes feel like we're admitting defeat. And that isn't how I want it to feel. I want it to feel like you are getting neutral, right? And a great way to help with that is feeling neutral as opposed to defeated is remembering that everything is temporary. This moment of grief, this big feeling that you're feeling, aversion to pleasure, hypersexuality, whatever is happening, it's all temporary. And so use that reminder to then say, okay, this moment is temporary. This situation is temporary. Let me name all the expectations I have for myself and let me release them. Right now, I do not expect myself to show up the way I did before to my pleasure. Okay? I don't expect that for myself while I'm grieving. The moment we are able to get neutral and release all of these expectations is the moment we actually start stepping into freedom. Okay? And so that is step 2, releasing the expectations, allowing yourself to just be. And then step 3, this is the fun step or more fun than maybe the others. The others are a little intense, right? The 3rd step is savoring. So now you've named your feelings, or you give yourself permission to name your feelings whenever they get big and overwhelming. You continue practices of releasing expectations for yourself. And now we're going to step into savoring. This is where, when you notice even a flicker of joy, you pause and you just get present and you savor that feeling. You savor that moment of pleasure. For example, I remember when my mom died, food tasted like nothing. And so all I would really eat was almonds for a long time. And then I remember the day that I ate a bowl of soup and I could actually taste it and it was good. And I just sat there and I savored that moment. I took that win. And that was a gateway to get to more pleasure and to allow that pleasure to really expand into other areas of our life. And so when we're thinking of savoring, I always encourage this of my clients: start outside of the bedroom and then move your way into the bedroom with reclaiming your pleasure. Because if we start in the bedroom with, okay, I'm gonna, especially if you're someone who's hypersexual, and so you're having a lot of sex or pleasure or partying or substances or whatever, even with those people, like, be present on the moments where pleasure feels good, because this allows you to differentiate between a superficial trauma response of using pleasure as a self-soothing versus, oh, I had this moment and that felt genuinely nourishing. And when we become present and start savoring, this literally changes our neural pathways. It changes the way your brain is working and noticing what is around you. And this 3-step framework, if you are consistent with it, present with it, commit to it, then over time and over a much shorter period of time, you'll find yourself healing aversion to pleasure or healing hypersexuality. And again, I do want to say there is nothing wrong with having a lot of sex. There's nothing wrong with having a lot of pleasure unless it doesn't feel healthy to you, right? Okay? Because I'm someone who has a lot of sex and that feels good and healthy to me. I'm happy with that, right? So that is the 3-step modality. That is how I move through these big emotions. And the last thing I'll really say is just remember healing isn't linear, okay? But by honoring your emotions, by releasing pressure, and by savoring what you can feel or what genuinely feels good, you create the space for sex and joy to return on your terms. Because this is what is so hard about grief is it feels like all of a sudden pleasure is not on our terms and it's out of our control, whether we're being hypersexual or whether we're avoiding pleasure altogether. It just feels so out of our control. So when you're going through that, name it to tame it, release expectations, and then make a commitment to start savoring and just noticing any flicker of joy or pleasure that you feel. And let the journey be the journey at that point, you know? This modality, what is so great about it is it gives you a path forward when it feels like nothing you're doing is working. You know, you have tools to fall back on that can support you. And then what I also love about this is it makes you so consciously aware of your healing process when you commit to it that you do heal 10 times faster than you would if you're just bare knuckling, going through the grief, going through the trauma, and whatever's happening with your pleasure, feeling whatever shame or shame hangover from it. If you use this 3-step modality consistently and commit to it in these moments of grief and pain and loss, you will have a really powerful way forward. And that doesn't mean that every moment is going to be amazing and that it won't be its own struggle, but you can do this. You got this. And ultimately, truly remember that everything is temporary. Okay. So thank you for joining me here live today. We do new videos every single Wednesday. I have some really fun stuff coming up for you guys. Some behind the scenes footage from the Human Rights Campaign LA dinner that I went to last week where Janelle Monáe was there and spoke, and I got to meet her as well as some other incredible Congress people. What else do we have coming up on the vlog? I was in Amsterdam doing sex research. So I'm going to be sharing with you guys some behind the scenes of that. Same with Paris. So we have some really fun content coming up for you guys in the coming weeks. So come back every single Wednesday and I will be here chatting with you and letting you into my life a little bit. And other than that, thank you for being in my community. Mwah. And I will be back soon. Oh, and actually, before I leave, go ahead and write a comment and let me know next time I come live, what would you like me to talk about, right? What would be interesting for you? As a sex scholar, I could talk about it all. So you just let me know. And that is all. I'll close things out today with that.